Welcome to The Real Build. This is your host, Jamela, and we are peeling back the curtains of the construction industry every hour on Tuesdays for you. I have a very special guest with me today, Cassidy DeVeer.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, I usually end with a title after Cassidy DeVeer, but you have like 14 titles. You're an amazing force in this construction industry. And I have been a secret fan behind the scenes as I have found my way through the industry. But Cassidy is the president of Third Generation Homes, past president of CHBA Okanagan, Canadian Home Builders Association, which we'll dive into what that is today. Past or current president of Provincial.
Past president.
Past president of the Provincial Canadian Home Builders Association. And right now has stepped in and is acting executive director for the local homeowners association.
Yeah.
And still the president of Third Generation Homes.
Yep.
So a round of applause. Everyone stand up and give her a round of applause. But thank you for making time for us today and coming on our show.
No problem.
And I want to dive in on like who you are, how you ended up here as a woman in construction. That's always the first thing people ask is how as a woman did you end up in construction? So let's start there. Have you always been in construction?
Kind of. I've always been around it. So my parents were builders. They owned a hardware store when I was a kid. So I just grew up talking about construction at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. And I just, kind of lived and breathed it from an early age. So it was kind of always something I probably didn't have a choice. I was probably always going to get into it.
Yep.
One of my favorite stories that I like to tell is when I was 5 years old. On Christmas Day, I came downstairs and my parents were so excited to give me my present, which was a giant, giant Barbie house. Very pricey, parents saved money to buy me this for Christmas. And I looked at it and was like, where are the stairs? It was a 2-story Barbie house and there was no stairs. There's no elevator. And I just looked at my parents. I was like, well, how are the Barbies going to get upstairs? And they were like, you got to be kidding me. You're 5 years old. And I was like, well, I guess they'll teleport through the closet. And so I think, from that point on, they were kind of like, okay, I guess this is the way you view the world. And I looked at, building houses very practically. And I think just from an early age, I enjoyed the experience. We moved a lot. My parents built homes a lot for our family. And so I just, lived and breathed it.
Okay. And so did you go off and work like retail or ice cream shop or like coffee shop, or were you just in the hardware store working on the construction sites right off the top?
I would work summers for my parents, even at younger ages than I probably should have been on job sites or that I can be anymore. We moved to the States for a couple years, so I was there from age 6 to 9, and then we moved back to Kelowna. They later on opened up a flooring store, so I worked in the flooring store a lot growing up. I went to university basically just to play basketball. I didn't really know what I was doing with my university degree, and sciences weren't really that exciting for me. So I was kind of just there to play basketball. And when I met my husband, he was a framer. So we started with starting our own framing company. And then from there, it went into building.
That is a really common path to a general contractor, I find.
Yes.
You start in framing. Mm-hmm. And because that is foundation framing is the fundamentals of how this house comes together. And if you can't see the complete vision when you're foundation and framing, the house is never going to come together. So I find when you get a really exceptional foundation and framing crew, you're pretty much expecting them to become a general contractor within the next 5 years.
Yeah, eventually, which is funny because it's. I think it's more out of a force too, because it's so hard. Framing is so hard on your body, in the traditional sense. And I think we'll talk a bit more later on about how that's changing, how our industry is changing. But your body just can't sustain that for forever, and so you end up moving into a role of site supervision or, project management, construction management. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's how you get off the tools in that space. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and a lot of this industry, a lot of the old knowledge, a lot of the dominant players, they come from the tools, from framing. They move into project management, construction management roles. What we're seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this unique place how women are kind of coming into the industry where they're coming from a design place, they're coming from a customer service, a legal, paperwork, administration, project management, and kind of moving into that contracting role from that space. So you get two different types of people there, but there's two paths in. Well, there's lots of paths in, but you don't need to come from the tools to organize and run a general contracting company.
Absolutely. At the heart of construction is planning and communicating, and two things that women generally excel in. And so that's why so many women are finding a lot of success in the construction industry, is that they're finding that the planning part is not that challenging. The communicating part isn't that challenging. Those are skills that we possess normally anyways. We have an easy time just telling people we're unhappy with something or not, pleased with how things are running, and we're able to communicate that in a easier, more professional way. So I think women are very suited for the industry.
I agree too. And I mean, we weren't, the purpose of the show wasn't to, be women in construction, because I love that all the players are like, you need everybody there.
Diversity.
Yeah. You need diversity. You need the different mindsets. You need the different thought processes to bring it together, and the different skill sets to bring it all together. But I think it's important to understand as a woman that there's big roles for you in the construction industry that can be very profitable, can be entrepreneurship of running your own business, many different sectors. And I'm seeing more and more women appear in these roles every day.
Particularly in Kelowna, I would say I've traveled across Canada, and I've walked into a lot of rooms where I'm the only female contractor in the room, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, a female's here. And I'm like, really? Back at home, it's not a big deal. Like, I find there's a lot of female builders in Kelowna and even in the Okanagan. So it's very, very normal for our area, but it is not the case across Canada.
I have to say, I have suffered with a bit of like imposter syndrome in running a building company because you're naturally not assumed to be the builder, right? Which is fine. Like, we're moving through change here, people. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
But that happens so many times. You're like, well, am I a builder? And then you realize, oh yeah, my phone rings enough that
totally
I'm a builder.
Yeah.
So okay, you meet your husband. You run a framing company. How long do you run the framing company?
I think that was only a couple of years. I think we got into building quite quickly after that. So we started Third Generation Homes in 2010.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
2010. That was an interesting year, because I think we were just climbing out of the last cycle, right?
Yeah, we were still in the trenches, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was still I would say it was still dog eat dog. Yeah.
Well, we're a small city, right?
Yeah.
120,000 people back then. I think we're up to 150 now. Like, we're not a million people population. So starting a business in general, it takes a lot of work and a lot of grind. And you were definitely coming out the flat side of the cycle, the last cycle. And so a lot of builders find success when they lock down in a neighborhood. Is that what you did?
Yeah, I would say our advantage was we built one house at a time, and we did everything. We framed it, we did the siding, we did the project management, we literally did everything. So we only needed one job at a time. And so when we got a job, that was 6 to 8 months worth of work. And so, getting one job is like, whew, all right, I'm booked up for, half the year or more. And then you have 6 months to find another job. And we, starting the business in 2010, learned how to be very lean. And learned how to do a lot of, all the little stuff that we need to, so we can, go up or go down as the economy changes.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to also think about. You were able to support your family building one home. It's amazing how much one home drives the local economy, how many people get paid, how many incomes get paid out of one home. It's such an important piece of our cycle of economy, and we're going to dive into that, because you have been at the forefront of these questions over the last cycle, being involved with the Canadian Home Builders Association. We're going to dive more into that next, so stay tuned. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamela, and we're talking with Cassidy DeVeer today of Third Generation Homes, also past president of the Canadian Home Builders Association Okanagan, and past president of the Canadian Home Builders Association provincially. Wealth of knowledge, and a lot of you out there might have heard of the Canadian Home Builders Association, maybe don't know what it does for you. You might work in the industry and don't know what it does for you. You might be a purchaser of home renovation and stuff and might not know what it does to you. So I've got lots of questions for you.
Awesome. I'm ready.
Okay. So let's just start with, what is the Canadian Home Builders Association?
Well, to keep it simple and sweet, we are the voice of the residential construction industry.
Okay, perfect. And a lot of people may not know, but there is a lot of background regulations and policy making that goes on for the residential construction industry. It's not long ago, it was quite cowboy. Yeah, and it has changed dramatically.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the licensing requirements. So, in prior years, anybody could go build a house. And now at today, you have to have a builder's license and you have to maintain that license. You have to take ongoing education, which our association does a ton of work on providing education to the builders and other members that need it. But that has really upped the game of our industry, and it has been such a positive change. You think of so many other professionals, whether you're doctors, accountants, financial advisors, you have to do ongoing education. You have to stay current with, what's happening within your industry. And it's been such a massive change, and it's just brought us to be far more professional than we were in the past. And
it also, and I'm a proud member of the Canadian Home Builders Association Okanagan, and the education's a big piece. I try and use that as much as possible, because if this didn't exist here, you would need to go to Vancouver. You need to do a lot of traveling, or I guess there's a lot of stuff online too that can be done. But also there's monthly networking events where we come together. And I think in tough times, and when you work as a general contractor, the industry can be going really good, and that's a tough time. Yeah. And the industry can be really flat, and that's also a tough time.
Feast or famine.
Yeah. So seeing these familiar faces coming together, talking about challenges you're having, the industry's really united.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to have those relationships. We're not a massive town, like you had said. If you want to hire a specific trade, there's not that many companies that can do the work. And so it's really important to maintain a positive relationship and understand the struggles that they're facing. So if you're wondering, why is this taking so long on our project, it's because they're struggling to hire anyone that's capable of doing the work based on, the number of clients they have. So like when every builder through COVID, every builder had an extra, 3 to 15 homes to build. You think of our trades, you times that by 10 clients they have, that's a massive amount of work. So it's very important to keep those.
I want to add to this, because this was one of the biggest struggles I had in that time, and my building time on my homes extended quite a bit, which snowballed a lot of things, right? I mean, you plan construction management budgets for a certain period of time. All of a sudden, you're adding 6 more months. It continues to go, and then you're overlapping jobs now, and you've got more than they can handle, and you're just mitigating mental health at this point to keep it going. But also in that time, tons of experience, knowledge retired.
Yes.
And this is an industry where, yes, we have great education programs now, but where it started is in a lot of those old guys, they were guys, old experience was in their mind, right?
Yes.
And I remember a very significant shift at one point where I was standing on a job site and I was like the senior oldest person there, and I was like, uh-oh.
You look great.
Where's the old guy?
Yeah, and I think business has just changed too. I remember talking to my dad about it a lot, and he said that when he was growing up in the industry, nobody talked to each other, nobody shared any information, everyone held held their cards
Close.
really tightly, really close, because they were too scared of letting anyone in and letting any competitors or whatever see their hand. And I think now it's completely different. Of like, I don't know what I would do if I couldn't call 3 other builders that I knew, whether they're in Kelowna, whether they're across the province, across Canada, and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or are you finding this is happening? And I had a builder the other day email me from it's just something from the city of Kimberley being like, hey, do you have to do this in Kelowna? I was like, well, not in Kelowna, but in West Kelowna we have to do this. So being able to just have the network is such an important part of our association too, because again, it just makes the jobs easier for everybody. It's
a very complicated industry, which is why the Canadian Home Builders Association, creating that network, having those people to call on is so important, and important to be a part of, because even every municipality is slightly different. Their bylaws are slightly different. Their zoning allocations are slightly different. And someone becomes an expert in one town or 1 or 2 or 3 municipalities, usually multiples around here because we're so close to each other. Someone else moves in, and hits a stumbling block because it was always done the same way here, and now it's different. You can call on each other and you can ask for help. And anyway, I find the most valuable tool of being a member is being connected to the knowledge and these expert builders. So how do you get to be, does anyone get to be a member?
No, we have a criteria for membership. So you need to be in business in the Central Okanagan area for at least 1 year. So we don't let anyone, come in and say, oh, I want to build my business, so I'll start with becoming a member. We say that you need to, establish and show that you are a legitimate business before you become a member, because members end up on our directory. So if you're ever looking for electrician, plumbers, framers, any of that stuff, you can go on our directory. We also have a code of ethics that everyone needs to adhere to. Sometimes we do get complaints from the public, and we form a complaints committee and assess things as needed as they come in. We also offer awards programs, so you get the chance to basically put your home, in front of all of your competitors, and we have a great lineup of judges that judge all of the entries, and our award program is quite exciting.
Yeah, so we'll talk about. I love the award show. I've got a great story for this, but reverse back the trades and suppliers. So they are also can become members of the Canadian Home Builders Association. So for those of you that aren't in the industry and might not be listening to this as like, oh, maybe I want to become a member. For those of you that are looking to hire a painter, looking to hire a finishing carpenter, looking to do your own kind of personal reno on your own, the Canadian Home Builders Association website of the Okanagan has a directory of trades in these different areas that you can search, and you can find people that have been credited by the Canadian Home Builders Association. So you can trust these people that are listed there. So that's a really good tool for the general public.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's again, like I say, it's people that haven't, come in here from, we see it all the time where people come in from out of town, particularly when it's really busy here, because generally BC and Alberta have different housing cycles. And so when it's really busy here and it's slow in Alberta, we will see an influx of people who ran out of work in Alberta and quickly want to pick up work in town. The problem is as soon as it slows down here, they're gone again, and they kind of leave the trail behind them. So it's really important that if people are going to come, especially out of province or out of town, that they're coming here to set up a shop, they're coming here to set up a business, and that the homeowners have that understanding of their products are going to be warranted when they're buying from them.
And I mean, that trickles down to the trades. We talked about there's a small trade group here that we all pull on. And when it does get busy, they're going to stick with their people that are staying here that have set up businesses. And so then if you're coming in and leaving, you're going to end up with a different trade pool to pull from, or you might have to bring trades in from out of town. So that's a great tip for people looking to build a home or do an infill project or a carriage home. Or we can't just say build a home anymore, because that's not as it's flipping, right? It's not as common as it is putting a duplex in your backyard or doing an infill property or doing a carriage home or tearing the house down and rebuilding the property. It's gotten to another level of complication there.
Yeah.
But okay, so CHBA, Canadian Home Builders Association, on city level, Okanagan, we've got a great website for the consumers to go and find trustworthy trades and builders. And we also have an incredible network for the builders and trades that are a part of this organization to work together, grow together, get education, and blow off some steam.
We like to have a good time. Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, and the award show, which is so amazing, it's local, it's provincial, it's national, and there's some amazing homes every year, and it's coming up soon. It's if you get a chance to go to these events, if you like watching HGTV, you got to come to these events. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up. When we come back, we are going to talk a little bit more of CHBA on a provincial level and what's going on. We've got an election coming up, what's happening in the market and what we should be thinking about. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Real Build. We peel back the curtains of the construction industry and we show you what it's all about. And today I have a very special guest, Cassidy DeVeer, president of Third Generation Homes, past president of Canadian Home Builders Association, past president of Canadian Home Builders Association, provincial, and right now acting executive director for the Canadian Home Builders Association locally. Hi.
We're back.
Did you get all that? There's a lot of hats there and a lot of knowledge we can pry out of here. So right before we left on the break, we only got to touch on the awards show and the awards that the Canadian Home Builders Association hosts and put on. And this is at a local level, a provincial level, a national level. It's very exciting times. Cassidy, tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so our awards are open for entries. Our call to entries has been out provincially as well, and I think national is going to release theirs pretty soon. So our members apply at all three levels for their projects from a variety of renovations, kitchen designs, new builds, infill. There's different awards for public-private partnerships. So let's say like a co-op type housing, energy efficient homes. There's a huge variety of projects, and it's really, really exciting to see what we're doing. And I have been to awards at all three levels, and basically the BC and the Central Okanagan Awards are by far the best across Canada.
And I've heard this, that the homes we're building here, when they go into like a national judging where you got people from Ontario looking, they're like, whoa, what are they doing in the Okanagan? Where's the Okanagan?
Absolutely, yeah. Particularly all the views they see in the background. I've judged a number of awards in Ontario, and I've talked to Ontario judges, and they're like, oh yeah, we always judge awards, and then we see a house hanging off a mountain, and we know that's in BC.
Yeah.
With a stunning view.
Yeah, so one thing that talks to is that the level of construction that is done locally in the Okanagan is pretty special.
It's world class. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've got this world-class group of builders that get to coordinate with each other. And I think we get to pull world-class building because we're such a tight-knit group. We're in a small city. We've got a small group of trades. And if you've got like-minded, quality, good product that wants to be produced, it's really top-notch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So get your awards in, guys. I know you're listening, guys and gals. I know you're listening. You have till what, November 1st?
November 1st.
November 1st. Get your submissions in. I know I got my assistant working on mine right now.
Perfect.
So let's talk more about the Canadian Home Builders Association at a local and provincial level, because a lot of what you guys do behind the scenes and what the board does and what you do specifically is advocate for the industry politically.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, lots of work.
Yeah. So tell me some stuff you've worked on.
Yeah, I'm also on a government relations committee provincially. So we meet monthly and talk about all the policies that the provincial government is working on. We meet with the current government. We meet with the opposition parties as well. Locally, we work with municipalities and whether that's their head of their building department or, the city manager and then nationally, our CEO does an incredible amount of work. Has just presented with the federal cabinet on their housing policies. He's on a number of committees. He's on international housing committees. So there is so much work in the advocacy file.
Oh, and, it's amazing how political our industry is.
So much.
And how much the vote, the elections, everything constantly affects how we ebb and flow, what we do. It can stunt our industry, just stop it on a dime, and it can fuel the industry.
Yeah.
And I know I get frustrated because I'm like, they'll do something, and it's like, they've kicked investors kind of out of the housing market here in BC. And I'm like, how do we get stuff built if we can't get investors to pre-buy this product, right? And I know to sit on these committees, the industry has the same thing we're asking for. It doesn't always happen. And we've got elections coming up. So, what's your advice right now to help support the industry? Because we're flat right now, right?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest problem that everyone's talking about is interest rates in the last 6 months to a year. It is what has really sidelined a lot of buyers and causing the biggest amount of pain for people. A lot of provincial rules and regulations have come in, but that wouldn't have made as much of an impact as the interest rates have. So if interest rates would have stayed, which they shouldn't have, they were too low. If they would have stayed down there, we would still be in a crazy booming housing market, regardless of the changes at the provincial level. So that's the biggest one that we're looking at. A lot of buyers are just on the sidelines waiting. A lot of people get nervous during election times. I've seen that over my entire career. Anytime there's a U.S. election, we're still a year away from a federal election. We have a provincial election this fall. People get, they just like to be a little more cautious until they really know what the world's going to look like on the other side of that, even if there aren't changes to who's in charge.
And the reality is the real estate industry has natural cycles that it goes through. However, we learned in the last 3 years that anything can happen. And I think that scares people a little bit, right?
Absolutely. And I think, what's great for our industry is that, through COVID, everyone realized that nothing's more important than their home and where they live on a daily basis. And so that has really helped our industry. And, it's something that drives a lot of people knowing the responsibility of our work and how meaningful our work is in providing a home for someone. The largest investment that most people will ever make is their home, and we get to deliver on that. So that's really exciting. There has been a number of changes provincially. We have the new upzoning. So the bill that came in that allowed fourplexes on all sorts of properties.
And I think that's one of the biggest and fastest moving change I've seen a government get through multiple municipalities in a short period of time. Municipalities, like, some ignored it was happening and then got caught in the last minute.
Oh, yes.
Some were all
West
over
Van.
it because they were going that direction anyway. And some even have never had a department create these types of rules before. So I'm sure the Canadian Home Builders Association stepped in a big way to advocate with all of these groups.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many studies done over all three levels that, the bottleneck of housing is with the municipalities, and that's, where it is. So we've been talking for years and years and years about speeding up the development approvals process, which you have seen. They've removed public hearings. It used to be, I know you've probably been through it, where you spend thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Some people even spend millions of dollars to get designs done, studies done, environmental, neighborhood consultations, all of that. It's all done. And the final process was a public hearing, where that needs to be at the front. The public needs to have their say of what should happen in their neighborhood, but that needs to be done through the official community plan. And once that official community plan is in place, then everyone understands what's going to be going in their neighborhood.
Well, and the thing is, though, it's a bit flawed because the only people who would show up to those are the people who don't want anything to happen.
Oh, the NIMBYs, absolutely. Not in my backyard.
Yeah. And the people who either enjoyed the fact, saw the value of it increasing land values and so on, or indifferent, they don't come, right? And so now you're fighting to put your project through up against 3% of the population that doesn't want it there. So I actually loved that we got rid of public hearings, because telling someone what they can do on their own property, having your neighbor have such a voice in what you can do on your own property is unbelievably frustrating.
Yeah.
And having to invest money to convince them that it's going to be beautiful is another level of frustrating. So I commend whoever got that.
Yeah, it was a provincial government. They've done a number. Of things. So they've done the removal of the public hearing. They have done the upzoning. They have really fundamentally. They've done generational change on how housing is delivered.
Yeah,
they've done it in a very short time period. It's been a lot.
Yeah,
it's been a lot for the industry to. Well, I shouldn't just say the industry, it's everyone in general, to adjust to and to see how the market changes. Obviously, there was the Airbnb ruling as well. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of new taxes. So we're not sure with all that quick change whether it all still is necessary.
I'm a big fan of the upzoning. I love infill development. I am passionate about it. I've been doing it for 5 years. I just can see how it comes together. And I love it because the average individual human who owns that home can increase their net worth and their generational wealth very manageably. So I think that was a great thing that came through. We are going to talk more next about where we are in this cycle, the shift, what's going on. Cassidy, thank you so much. Stay tuned. We're going to keep going. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamela, and I have a wonderful special guest, Cassidy DeVeer, president of Third Generation Homes. Welcome.
Hello.
We've also learned that she plays a major role in the Canadian Home Builders Association, advocating a lot politically for the industry. And it couldn't be more important than ever right now, because we have an industry that's flat, right? We have interest rates has really kind of halted us here, in combination with the elimination of Airbnb, which takes away investor purchases of pre-sales. Pre-sales are mandatory for most multifamily construction projects to get financed. And with the slow sales market, appraisals are not meeting construction costs. So we're in a real tumbleweed here of things. We did talk about how there's been some really good policy making as well, with the infill development and multifamily housing on your single family home property. But we have an election coming. We have an election coming, and definitely there could be different outcomes depending on how that goes. So what's your inside view here?
Absolutely. I mean, provincially, the NDP has been very clear. They've had their Homes for People's plan for a while now. It's, we understand they've taken on a lot of what's in that plan already. So we kind of covered a lot of that before. I have not had a chance to see the BC Conservatives housing platform at this point.
Okay.
And then on a national level, the Liberals actually have quite an amazing housing plan. It was very interesting, though, after they released it, there was no bump in the polls, even though everyone really supported their housing plan.
Yeah.
It's very clear that even though their housing plan is great, most people don't like the federal Liberal government.
The brand is a Buick right now. And that's really unfortunate, because as someone who feeds my family through housing, to hear them having the most polished housing plan going forward with really no hope of them getting in is a bit concerning.
Yeah, I think the Conservatives realize federally that they don't really have to do a whole lot, that everybody just generally is tired of the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau. And so they're kind of basically riding that. They're riding the fact that they're very popular right now. Their ratings in the polls are very high. Everyone you talk to is ready for change, regardless of whether the federal Liberals are their normal party or not. You're seeing a lot of people that are just, looking forward to Trudeau potentially moving on. And so I imagine that the Conservatives will still run with a lot of what that housing plan is.
Okay, well, let's maybe throw out there This is a very emotional vote for most of Canada then, and maybe let's just look a little bit logically at it before we make our final decision.
Yeah. It's interesting times.
And then provincially, and when we were on the break, we talked about one of the biggest things that is going to really affect our boom or bust housing industry across the entire country is immigration.
Yeah, that's the real question mark, I would say. So CMHC has come out with their housing shortage report. So Canada is short 3.5 million homes on top of what they normally build a year. And so by 2030, we need like over 5 million homes built, which is never going to happen.
6 years.
Yeah, never going to happen. And so the biggest, and of those 3.5 million homes, 570,000 of those are in BC. And on a boom year, we only built 47,000 homes. That's our record-setting year.
And if I could put this into perspective for the average person who's not in the industry, we talked earlier how Cassidy and her husband supported her family building one home a year, or one and a half homes a year. I went through a turmoil 3 years with taking on a lot of construction. I still only built 20 houses, and it was a lot of work. Yeah. I mean, there was also a condo building in there, too, which added another layer. But to really only bring to market 48 doors, and the amount of work and money that went into that was crazy. So the demand they're putting on the industry in the next 6 years, it makes me feel hopeful that I'm going to have some new starts coming soon.
Right? Yeah. If everyone could just build 10 times their record-setting year, that's what the need is. So obviously something's going to have to change. We're going to have to change how we're building homes. We're going to need to go more modular, more factory built. Timelines are going to have to be sped up. So we talked about that a bit with the development approvals process. Yeah. And then, if immigration changes, that number might change. And so, the federal Conservatives have talked about reducing immigration. And so, it's kind of a chicken and the egg. So if we bring in, higher levels of immigration, we need more housing, and we're already short housing. But at the same time, we're out of doctors, we're out of nurses. We talk about needing trades and in order to build that, housing deficit we're already in. And so, cutting immigration isn't going to solve the problem either, but probably somewhere in the middle is where we're going to need to be.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, even if they did cut immigration, our number is still a big number of housing to service
very
here right now.
Yeah, Kelowna's housing deficit, I don't remember the top of my head, but I think we're already short 3,000 homes in Kelowna. It's 3 to 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
The city did come out with their housing deficit, and that's based on, the number of people that are, still living with their parents because they can't afford to move out, or people living with friends, or because they just can't afford it.
And this is where I love the densification of single-family homes to fourplexes, because it's just going to create a new piece where people who own property can create generational wealth. They can create the home for their elders. They can downsize on their own property and, have their home now have their kids' family live in it, and they're in their 2-bedroom apartment over the garage in the back, right? So the mindset that people have to start thinking of these different options. There's we got to start educating people on what these different options are. But one thing to think about, and we've talked about housing cycles, and I find it so funny is that people love to put money into real estate when it's gangbusters crazy.
Yeah.
And it's about to burst. And you can't even make the numbers work anymore because it's so gangbusters crazy. And you can't talk them out of it. They do it anyway. And it only kind of works. And then they're like, oh, real estate's the worst. You know what I mean? But now is really the time. In my opinion, we're at the beginning of the cycle. Real estate is long plays. It's not short plays.
That's what most people forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to think about, say you wanted to add something to your backyard, that's a 2-year project. Planning, designing, pricing, financing, tear down, construction. And so to be at the beginning of the cycle right now, you're going to get the best labor rates, the best product rates that's possible before we really start to catch up and get a little bit busy.
Yeah, and I always say the cheapest time to build was yesterday.
Oh, yes.
It's always more expensive. Tomorrow will always be more expensive. Stats Canada tracks construction costs on a quarterly basis. And even in 2009, when we had a worldwide housing crash, construction costs in Canada barely went down. There's certain things that are commodity based, like lumber, that will have, they'll go way up and way down. But overall, the average cost only ever goes up. So you can look at it from the 90s. There's added code changes. We need homes to be safer. Now there's accessibility code changes coming in. So homes only get pricier. The standard at which people want in their homes only becomes nicer. And so I've heard over and over again people saying, oh, well, I'm going to wait for construction costs to come down. It never happens.
Doesn't happen.
It never, ever happens, and it never, ever will. The only thing you can count on is the value. You could say, well, I'm going to wait till the value of my home goes up. I'm going to wait until, my investments go up or I have more money.
But you'll spend more money, too, because it means everything's gone up.
Yep. You will. Yep.
And one thing I think that I wish people could remember is, it's a man-made product, human-made product, right? Hands, hammers. It's not 3D printed. Nothing's picked off the shelf at Target. It's hands in there putting it together and created and crafted for you. It has not revolutionized in its techniques. So it takes a lot of manpower, human power, to put these together. And those people's wages,
they aren't going down.
Though the cost of materials, once it hits a price, it stays a price. So biggest tips, best time to build was yesterday. We're at the beginning of the next cycle. And we're going to need housing no matter what government gets in.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking to get into the industry or you want to hire a great trade, go to the Canadian Home Builders Association website, see the participating partners and trades. That's a great place to start. Thank you so much, Cassidy.
Thanks for having me.
So good to get to know you here today, and we're definitely going to have you back.